Good evening. Welcome to Crossroads Career Network webinar today. As always, we appreciate you joining us. My name is Tom Jacobson. Many of you have probably seen and been to some of our previous webinars and heard the same introduction each time. I'm grateful, however, that we have several new people participating each time, and I want to make sure everyone is aware of what we freely offer through Crossroads and what you can take advantage of and the resources that are available. So if you've heard much of this before, bear with me, and we'll get to our topics very soon. On a volunteer basis, I lead the Crossroads out of Woodbury Lutheran Church in Woodbury. However, we have 3 Twin Cities Crossroads locations, and until we have meetings in person, again, we'll be combining our efforts online. I'm looking forward to our presentation today, and I know it will be informative and helpful, but I also want to hope you get some encouragement and pursuit in your next career. I'll give you an overview of what's available through Crossroads, but first I want to share some that I hope will give you some perspective as well. Now, whether you're a Christian or not, the Bible has some great wisdom in it, go figure. But in the book of Romans tells us about God and who he is and what he has done, and about Jesus Christ and what his death means for us. The book is about hope, and if you are in transition, hope is very important in these, especially in these COVID times. One passage says, and it's Romans 15:13, "May the God of hope fill you with all the joy and peace as you trust in him, so that you may overflow with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit." So overflowing with hope is great when you're in transition, because that really transcends you, through you, and to who you're speaking. And I really think that makes a big difference. There are also many other ways that this can be good advice, to be filled with hope, especially in our job search. It'll be more fruitful. Our attitudes towards our circumstances will be positive, and we will beam with God's love. In these days of having hope in God and pray the power of the Holy Spirit in us, will give us a positive strength so we can deal with this sudden onset of winter that we've had recently. We went from 70 to snow and cold, and that can have a negative effect on one's psyche. So being filled with hope and being encouraged by hope will definitely help us get through this winter and the COVID crisis that we have to face on a very positive, and help us with our positive job search. So let me open us in prayer, and then I'll give you an overview of Crossroads. Lord, thank you for bringing us together tonight through the technology of Zoom and all the little internet secrets that are out there, helping us to really be able to present in a very positive light what we have to learn tonight and hear from the speakers. Help us to really put what we learn tonight, if we do, into practice as quickly as possible. Help us to really focus on what we're trying to get out of our career and what we can make our career become. I know we're going to have some really enlightening words tonight, and hopefully they'll be encouraging to all of us. Help us to embody what you have in store for us, and help us follow your path that you are leading to us. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. Okay, now with the power of technology, I will share my screen with you. And there you have it. So welcome to Minnesota Crossroads Career Network. The Twin Cities, we have 3 Crossroads groups, one out of Eden Prairie at Grace Church, the one that I was talking about earlier out of Woodbury at the Woodbury Lutheran Church, and then our 3rd site is in Arden Hills at North Heights Lutheran Church. So to get in more information about any one of these sites, check it out at www.minnesotacrossroads.com. So there's a lot of information on that site. So I welcome you to go see it and see what's there. As you can see on this slide, there's three main areas for job seekers, job boards, and employers. So that's just one area that we highlight. We post jobs from all over the Twin Cities. The one nice thing about the jobs we do post, there will usually be a contact associated with that. So if you don't have to be applying into the darkness of night, the black hole out there, you can actually have someone to talk to, and that can be very helpful at times about it. So check out our jobs posted online, and then also explore our website. There's a lot of great things out there, and I'll talk a little bit more about it as we go along here. So other things that we have are weekly opportunities for networking through Grace, called Networking with Grace. It's online right now. We've had it's a very successful program that meets in person when we're not doing all this Zoom and other things that we have to do to cope with COVID. But it really is a great opportunity to network with people throughout the Twin Cities and help expand that professional network that you need in order to really find those hidden jobs that in the hidden job market. And we all know about 80% of all jobs come from that market, so that hidden job market. So networking can help us open those doors and unlock those windows into those companies. So feel free to check that out. Go online, sign up for the meeting. It's limited space because it can't get too big. So come in, get in there early and see if it does help your networking and your ability to jumpstart your career. Other things that are available: one-on-one coaching. They can be had at any time and are available anytime. Just check out our website, sign up for those things that may be helpful. And then during this time when we're in transition, sometimes the help of prayer and others praying for us can make a big difference, especially in your attitude and how you feel. And so you have the ability to have others pray for you through our website. You can sign up, and they'll submit your request, and the power of prayer may be one thing that will help you to turn the corner in your job search. So another thing that's available on a weekly basis is online classes. And our online classes are a wonderful thing. And we have one of the things that with our online classes, they come with this great book, an 8-week course designed for job search and led by people who have gone through job search and know quite a bit about it. So, and it's a wonderful thing. And we have classes starting all the time. And so happens that we have a class starting this coming Tuesday that has room in it. So if you're interested, please go online and sign up. It's from 3:30 to 5:30, and it starts on the 17th. So there'll also be classes starting in December and January, 1 in December and 2 in January. But if you really want the highest quality instructor, sign up for the one starting on Tuesday. It's 𝘾𝙖𝙡, who's also manning the backboard tonight, helping us out. So Harry's, I've gone through Harry's class, and there's nothing more inspirational than that class. Well, I can't speak for, I hadn't seen everybody, but give it a try. So these Zoom meetings, the classes are done through Zoom now. We used to have them in person, and hopefully soon we'll be going back to in-person ones, but they're 8 weeks, as I alluded to. In the book, there are 7 chapters. One, as you can see on the slide, there's a one on attitude, assessments, networking, targeting companies, resume building, interviewing, negotiating, and selecting the company that you go with. I think that some of the groundwork that's built in the early assessment or the early weeks of the class through making sure your attitude is in the right place and really assessing where you need to be and what types of jobs you should be looking for through the assessment process can be very valuable. So I think, and many believe, that the meat and potatoes of Crossroads is right in these small groups, and some of the relationships that you form through these groups can be very helpful in combating the ups and downs of transition, networking, being introduced to different things, having someone to rely on and talk back and forth with when you're going through the things that transition can put in front of you. So yeah, highly recommend the 8-week course as something that to jumpstart your job search and really put it in a positive direction towards helping you get your next career opportunity. I have led several of them myself, and one of the most euphoric things that happens during the 8-week course is when someone actually lands. And if you have 2 or 3 people land, that builds momentum. And if you have 2 or 3 every week, that can really build momentum. So for everyone that's involved. So highly recommend the 8-week course. And like I said, there's still room in the 17th, the class that's starting on the 17th. Check it out online and see if it is meant for you. So also, Minnesota Crossroads Career Network has a LinkedIn group. There's, I believe it's 1,800 people who have gone through job search and transition themselves, who would be willing to help in any way possible. There's also articles posted there, a lot of information that can be useful, other things, tips and tricks. So, sign up for the LinkedIn group at Minnesota Crossroads Career Network. Just type that into your search bar there, right next to the LinkedIn logo, and you'll find our site, our network, and join it. And don't look back, because it could be the jump start you need to help you with your networking. So in addition, we want to thank Thrivent, who has been a great partner to us through these at Minnesota Crossroads. They're terrific at providing resources and helping us with virtual events, and will help you with your job search, these things that they offer. So check them out. There are other great groups on our website too, but look for the links again through our job search website at minnesotacrossroads.com. Doing the work that we do at Crossroads is not done by one person. There are many people here. Some of the faces that are associated with our network and the Minnesota Career Crossroads. So these are just a part of the faces, and the several, and probably many know. So if you've been to one of our Crossroads events, like our Christmas party, which we're not having this year, but unfortunately due to COVID, but a lot of great people doing a lot of great things to help with job transition at Crossroads. So check us out, and on the website, and through the classes, and obviously you're checking us out here on the webinar. So it can be really great. And if perchance you're still you're in need of a church home, right now we're streaming online. A lot of churches are still streaming online, but here's the websites. You can pick up the stream at Woodbury Lutheran, North Heights Church, or Grace Church. Check out the opportunities there, and for your spiritual needs on whenever you need it. So that is the program I wanted to share with you. So again, go out and see it. Sign up for the classes. It can be a real help for you all. With that, I'm glad to have an opportunity to introduce Charlie. Charlie Lamb. I've known Charlie for a short time. He is a strong family guy. He has a strong background in operations leadership and has been a leader in the airline industry and technical support. He recently had a career crossroads experience, and he would like to share that with you now. Charlie, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. So, well, take it away, Charlie.
All right. Thank you, Tom. First of all, I want to apologize. My mic doesn't seem to be working too well, so I will be talking loud, but my mic doesn't go up any louder. So hopefully you can turn your volume up a little bit to hear me. Am I there?
Charlie, I apologize. I accidentally muted you, but you should be back on now. You should be on, Charlie.
Are you there?
Charlie, you're on.
I'm sorry about that. Now I've got internet problems in addition to mic problems. Okay. Sorry about that, everyone. Now I got internet problems in addition to problems. So to the times that we live in, right? First of all, thank you to Tom and Herring for inviting me to share my story. My career began a little bit unconventional, I would like to say. When I finished college, I was a little bit aimless, and so I went and then I went off to Colorado as a ski bum out in Beaver Creek, Colorado for about 6 months. One of the greatest jobs I've ever had in my life. When I came back from that, I had to hit the real world, and I was lucky enough to land a job in the airline industry. I spent, like Tom mentioned, I spent the first 20 years of my career working for Northwest Airlines. I started off as a flight attendant, soon moved into training roles, and then I got into different various management positions, working with the flight attendants, with the pilots for the last 10 years of my career. I was lucky also enough to live in a number of different cities. I lived in Detroit for a little while. I lived in Hawaii for a little bit, Seattle for about 3 years, and it was nice to move back home to Minneapolis as we have a family here and as we were growing our family too. In 2001, I was let go after the 9/11 incident, which was a little heartbreaking for me, but it was a short stint. It was about 2 months I was off. And actually, I think I was still on severance pay by the time they brought me back to a different role. And then after that, I decided I needed a little more tools underneath my belt. So I went to St. Thomas and got my MBA in 2004 through 2006. Great program. Learned a lot from my peers as well as the professors. Really enjoyed that. And then in 2008, 2009, Delta came in. They offered me a position in Atlanta, and it just wasn't the time for me to move. I had 3 kids, and one in each school, elementary, junior high, and high school. Time, neither my wife or I wanted to move to Atlanta as well. So then I began what I call my first transition. I was off for about 18 months. During this time period. Looking back on it, it didn't seem as stressful as one of these last transitions I went through for a couple different reasons. One, I had a year of severance pay, so the financial burden wasn't there as much. And then it was also right after the Great Recession, so there was some extended unemployment benefits I was going through there. I was also offered placement service help in terms of my resume, and that was kind of the boost back then in 2010, 2011. I can't remember the name of the program now, but through the Career Force Center, they offered different training programs, and I actually was able to get my project management certificate during that time frame as well. After 18 months, like I mentioned, I landed at Honeywell, and actually was a union, or excuse me, not union, a contractor at Honeywell. But it was a great transitional role for me because first of all, it taught me that there was life outside the airline. And second of all, it told me a lot about B2B customer service, which I feel today is my sweet spot, is what's something I really enjoy and I think I'm really good at. That relationship building with those partners, those business partners. I still enjoy customer service, but I enjoy the B2B rather than B2C more so. So after a year and a half at Honeywell, I moved on to Toro. And Toro was a great company. I give my boss a lot of credit because he took some faith in me because I was leading a team of 10 technical product support managers or representatives. I was the man of the group. And I was not a technical guy. He'd like to say I was a good leader, and I think that's why he brought me in. Enjoyed the job, learned a lot, enjoyed going on the business trips on conventions. We had 2 or 3 conventions every year. Enjoyed getting to know the customers from the mom and pop operations to the large dealers and multi-million-dollar dealerships. Enjoyed all of that. In the end, though, I have to admit, I ended up with a bad boss. I really did give it the college try. Ended up resigning in June of 18. And this transition lasted about 8 months. And it was, again, a little different in the sense that my brother, I spent the first 2 or 3 months being with him, helping take care of him before he passed away. And then unbeknownst to all of us, my father got ill and he died within a month. So I lost my brother and my father within a 2-month period. So that was pretty hard. Then after the holidays, I really hit the job market hard. And I got a job at a startup company. And this was an interesting experience for me because I'd never been with a startup company before. And they offered me a lot of things, stock options. And then when I finally got on board, they kept changing things around. And I understand things change, but the priorities and the vision kept changing. I'm not sure they knew exactly what they're doing, but long story short, it wasn't a good fit for me. We left, we parted ways mutually, so to speak. And then it really started with my next transition. I didn't know at the time it was going to be 14 months long, but I was devastated. I didn't want to be here. I'd done it, like I said, 2 or 3 times before. I'm generally a very positive person, but I was finding it very, very hard to maintain that positivity. So I really did start turning back to God and renewing my faith a little bit. I remember during that time period meeting with my pastor, and he was nice enough and gave me a book called Uncommon Life Challenges by Tony Dungy. It's a daily devotional, if you will, with the Bible verse and then how, his life or to your life. And it really got me thinking a little bit more. I also started going to some of these networking groups at the churches. I started off, to be honest with you, at Woodvale Church, enjoyed that. After a couple months, I started going to the Crossroads one in the Eden Prairie. And then I switched to the Woodbury one last fall, a little bit smaller group where I got to know Tom. Tom was a great leader and enjoyed getting to know him better. And it was a really nice group. It was about 10 to 15 people. And we were able to help each other out. With these groups and the new friends I met and doing a lot of extra exercise, and my faith, it really kept me going during this time period. It was a tough time. And then it finally came true. I mean, it just sometimes out of the blue. I had a couple great interviews, and I finally got that call from my new boss at H.B. Fuller with a great job offer. At that point, I was willing to less. But it came in right where I was at before, and I was really happy. I can't tell you really how thankful and relieved I was. And I know, a lot of you are probably wondering how I got the job. And I have to admit, I really did start off with just an internet application. Although I know one of Tom and I's good friends, Ruth, worked at H.B. Fuller, and she knew a lot of the players there and put some good words in for me. So I'm sure that helped. And it didn't hurt that my boss spent his first 25 years at Northwest Airlines as well, although we didn't know each other there. So I've been there for about 3 months now. That's why I can't see leaving, nor do I want to get back into that transitional phase again. If I had any advice for you, I would say keep the faith. Stay positive for your own sanity every day, whether that's praying, exercise, meditate. And I'm sure Kristin's going to give you a few more great ideas. when she's talking and giving you some great stuff too. But you will get through this. You will land on the other side. I can tell you that certain. And I truly believe in the saying that what doesn't kill, I think we all take it making us a stronger person going forward. I'm going to keep it short, and that's about all to my story. The other thing I really want to say is a big thank you to all the volunteer leaders. Harry and Tom, and like Tom mentioned, there's a lot of other leaders out there who volunteer their time to help us out, to help you out. And I really do appreciate that. They provide great, meaningful support to all of us. So thank you, Tom and Harry. I appreciate the time you've given me today. All this, the 2-minute victory lap. So I appreciate that I've had the opportunity to do that. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Charlie. That was good talk. I really appreciate hearing what you had to say, even though I knew a lot of it from knowing you personally. But I think we all can appreciate your perspective. If we've gone through transition, it can be very low, and we can get low, and having the right resources around can really make a big difference. And it sounds like you tried almost everything you could to find the resources that are necessary to help you in your job search. So kudos to you. Now, I'm also really glad to introduce Kristin Evenson. Kristin is a consultant and coach with credentials in intersecting the neuroscience, Christ-centered mindfulness, and creative prayer practices, having completed the Neuro Leadership Institute brain-based coaching program, transforming center's 2-year Strength the Soul of Your Leadership program, and a spiritual direction training program through Sustainable Faith. Kristin herself has navigated career transition and pivots, and has a deep desire to equip others with the ups and downs and the significant opportunities and change that present to all of us. So also, if you have any questions for Kristin, you can type them in the Q&A box on your Zoom app. She may address some as we go, but if there's some left at the end, we'll read them to her, and she'll try to address those at the end. Thanks for joining us, Kristin. I'll turn it over to you now, and it's your show now.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate that. And it's so nice to be with you all. I've had a heart for Crossroads Career Network for quite a few years. I've been involved for probably 15 years, and I myself have been in a couple significant transitions. And as Tom asked me before we came online, when I went through transition, and I honestly said, I feel like my whole career journey has been a transition. I've transitioned from corporate life to consulting and back to corporate. So I'm well acquainted with transition, and I'm really privileged to be able to share some of the insights, both brain-based and soul-based, spiritual-based, that have been really meaningful to me in that process. So I'm going to, I've got a PowerPoint to share, and we'll walk through that. I want you all to know there are a couple places where I am going to ask some questions, so would love to have you be ready to participate in the group chat. And there will be a poll a little bit later. So we'll try to make this interactive a little as best we can on Zoom. So here we go. So this is all about the brain and change, and especially how to calm the mind and strengthen the soul in career transition. Hopefully making it the best of times. And if you're like me, there may be a lot of anxiety, and you might be thinking about or well acquainted with all the worst case scenarios that could happen from this transition. If that is you, like it was for me, I just want you to know right off the bat, it's not you, it's your brain. As a leading neuropsychologist has said, we have a very primitive Stone Age brain dealing with 21st century realities. And we'll walk through that, but our brain is just not at all well equipped for change and transition and uncertainty. But there are some things we can do. You may also be feeling like there's some opposing forces between your heart and your head in all of this. Oftentimes when we're in transition, it raises questions of significance. You know, wow, who really am I and why am I here? And do I have a deeper sense of purpose in the world that could be reflected in this next chapter in my work? And then on the other hand, our brain and its inhibiting factors tends to shut down, and literally we're less able to think creatively and courageously when it comes to uncertainty. So our brain is saying, I want certainty, avoid risks at all costs. So there can be a challenge between the two. And that's really where my first big transition and my personal journey into this topic came. I had been working in one of the larger ad agencies here in the Twin Cities for about 20 years. I was an account director, loved my work, loved the business rigor combined with creativity. But there was a lot of travel and a lot of intensity. And for most of that, I was a single mom to my son. And by the time he was about 13, so he was in middle school, I could just tell he just wanted me to be home more. He just needed me around. He was doing fine, but I could just tell I could tell he wanted my presence more at home. And I was feeling bleary-eyed and burnt out, and had honestly been praying for quite some time, trying to navigate how best to juggle the responsibilities and demands of my life and my work. And so the spring of 2003, or right that winter, I had this sense, I felt like the winds were changing. And I just got the sense that maybe this was the year that this would all be resolved for me, that God would, show me what was next. And I would get all excited because, oh my gosh, it's what I was created for. And I would step seamlessly into the next career chapter, and maybe take a couple of weeks off if I could afford it. And that is just not the way it went down. I look back now and can call it a dark night of the soul experience. But I was so burnt out, I couldn't even begin to think what might be next. And in the midst of feeling like the door was closing behind me in my current job and not knowing what was next ahead of me, I sensed, I was in some spiritual community. I was in a prayer group with some friends, and I had this sense that God was calling me to quit my job without knowing what was next, which was one of the craziest things I'd ever heard. I'm not only at this time a self-supporting single mom, but I'm a firstborn Iowa farm girl, and we just don't do stuff like that. We're overly responsible, if anything. And to this day, my dad, my mom, my sister, my brother, and my brother-in-law have all been in not only one career, but with one company their whole career. And so here I am. I mean, that's just not the land I come from, to quit a job. So out of all that, I could also feel this desire in my heart to like, oh, what if I could just quit and have a little break? I mean, there was something that was just so exciting about that for me, but everything in my brain said, Kristin, you'll lose your house. Your son won't be able to go to college. I was just well acquainted with all the worst case scenarios. So there's this battle in me. And the journey from that is where this all started for me. And that's been 20 years ago, 20 plus years ago. But what happened was that, I'll tell you the end of the story, and then through the presentation, I'll tell you how I got there. The end of the story is that by God's grace, I worked some things through, and I had the courage to quit my job. And what happened was that I ended up having a beautiful sabbatical time. I ended up not working for a year and a half, and had time with my son that I'd never thought I would have. I'd longed to be a stay-at-home mom for a period of time, but I thought that ship had sailed. I was able to walk to school and pick up my son, walk him home. I know some of how the bills got paid, but I cannot explain to you how all the bills got paid for a year and a half. It's just something divine and miraculous happened. And God's greatest gift to me came in this really disturbing package of lack of work and not knowing what was next. So out of all that, the spiritual practices that I learned that helped me navigate that and the brain science. I've studied in brain-based coaching to try to reconcile the brain and the heart in places like this. So tonight, what we'll cover, we'll talk about the brain's inherent struggles with ambiguity, and we'll talk about ways to combat some of those things. And then we'll also talk about spiritual practices that honestly, neuroscience is showing there are certain spiritual practices, not some of the ones we're most familiar with, but certain spiritual practices that literally calm our mind, strengthen our soul, deepen our discernment, and cultivate Christ-like character. So stay tuned for that. So the brain and change. First, 6 insights about the brain. The brain is a connection machine, constantly, aggressively working to connect what we're experiencing to things we know or things we've understood or interpretations we've made of the world. No 2 brains are alike. Certainly, even if you looked at 2 brains up close, they're very different in appearance, but also in the inventory. My inventory in the back of my subconscious brain is totally different than anyone else's based on the experiences I've lived through, the interpretations I've made of those experiences, the things I've learned. So we're all operating from kind of a mental hard drive that is very unique to us and very distinctive from others. That hardwiring in our subconscious brain, or the brain hardwires everything it can and does it as quickly as it can. Because having a thought that is kind of unreconcilable or that we can't really interpret takes a lot of energy in our prefrontal lobe. So the brain is working as quickly as possible to connect it to something we know and file it away, and do that aggressively and quickly. That hardwiring in the back of our brain drives our automatic perception. And we'll talk a little bit about how automatically that happens. It's practically impossible to deconstruct all the things we've learned and known and interpreted, which can be kind of discouraging, but it's very easy to create new wiring to overlay on top of that. So it's not about trying to undo what we've learned. It's more about learning new things to overlay on what we've learned in the past that may not serve us as well in this chapter. So here are just 3 parts of the brain. The prefrontal lobe, again, is where we have our conscious thought. Takes a lot of energy to be thinking through things through. We may like to think that we're great multitaskers, but honestly, this part of our brain has very small capacity. Generally, only about 4 pieces of information can be happening at one time. And if we're working through a process, only our brain needs most of its mental energy to just work through that one process. And it's been described, this part of the brain has been described as Goldilocks because it needs just the right neurochemicals to operate its best. And this is the place where our focus can be easily distracted. The non-conscious brain, that part in the back, is where everything has been hardwired. It is a place where we can multitask very easily. A lot of the things like walking, breathing, riding a bike, doing tasks that are just very second nature to us, typing, those kinds of things can happen simultaneously without requiring a lot of energy. And this part of our brain has a massive capacity. In fact, it's been said that if the frontal lobe is like a star in the sky, the non-conscious brain is like the Milky Way. It's just vast and has a huge capacity. The third part that will factor into our conversation tonight is the limbic system. And this is the emotional center of our brain, which organizes everything that incoming information as a threat or a reward, very primitive. And this part of our brain is very hyper alert to, and responds very instinctively. It's the emotional center of the brain. So let's talk first about negativity bias. We'll talk about threat state next, but let's talk about the brain's negativity bias, which is one of those primal barriers to change that just happens for all of us. It's been said that for our brains, bad is stronger than good. And this is really true. It's been shown in research that our brains recall negative events more quickly. Our brains mentally and emotionally imprint negative experiences deeply in the brain more easily. It remembers ongoing or negative experiences more easily than positive experiences. And our brain tends to make things gloomier than they actually are. which is called mood bias. We oftentimes then tend to rehash negative experience from the past or rehearse things we anticipate being negative. And that just embeds the negativity more deeply in our brain. I will say that positivity is one of my top 5 strengths. I'm by nature a very positive person. But again, when I've been in transition or in ambiguous places, I am just stunned by how negative I can go, how negative I can go and how quickly, because that's just the brain's natural orientation. It's been said that the brain is like Velcro for the bad and Teflon for the good. So we need to learn to take in positive experiences, weaving them into the fabric of our brains. But we can use the mind to change the brain. And this is about intentionality. Neuroplasticity is the capacity that our nervous system has to develop those new neural connections that, again, we can overlay over the old information that may not be as useful as helpful. So we can change how we think and how we perceive things. Again, having positive experiences is not enough. They pass through the brain like water through a sieve, while negative experiences are caught. We need to engage positive experiences actively to weave them into the brain. So again, the intentionality that's required. It's just important, and especially in times of transition, to be very intentional about our thought processes and trying to reframe, recognize and reframe how our brain is processing information. So how do we combat this negativity bias? There are a variety of ways we'll talk through in the coming slides. I'll take you through each one of these. But I think the moral of the story is that overall, if any of us were brought up to just kind of, if you have a bad thought or negative thoughts, just don't think about it. Just push it away. Don't feel the negative emotion. Don't think the negative thoughts. That's actually not going to be the most helpful thing, because that just leaves it unattended in the unconscious brain. The best thing is to be attentive to our thoughts, to be honest about them, and to work to reframe them into something more positive. And again, that kind of neuroplasticity to try to train our brain into a new way of thinking about the same things. So being really honest and reframing is kind of the moral of the story here, with some intentionality. So the first thing is to reframe negativity and stress. Oftentimes we go through our worst case assumptions. If you're like me, oh my word, I'll lose my house, my son will never go to college. But to stop and pause and even just think about that. How realistic is this, Kristin? Have you been through situations like this before? Has that ever happened? Well, actually, no. I've landed on my feet and things always work out. And so what are some more helpful scenarios that might transpire out of all of this? So again, being willing to kind of be honest about the negative thoughts, give them their attention, and then kind of take them on and try to reframe them can be a helpful strategy. Our attitudes about stress. I found this so fascinating. It is not the presence of stress in our lives. We all lead stressful lives in this 21st century world we live in, and certainly in pandemic and 2020, for heaven's sake. We all have stress. So it's not about the presence or absence of stress. The differences in our attitudes, our beliefs about stress are the pivotal thing. And the goal is to make stress your friend. So it's been found actually that people who think of stress as being a positive thing, like if your heart starts beating and your breath starts heightening, to think about that not so much as kind of a panic response, but that your body is engaging to be more intentional and to bring its energy to whatever is in front of you. So to think of stress as your friend, to think of stress as heightening your bodily and mental responses to help you engage at a different level. That is the difference. People who think stress is bad have higher mortality rates. People who think stress is helpful or have a positive attitude about stress have lower mortality rates in studies. And even in bodily response, it's been found that people who use stress to their benefit, their blood vessels stay open and their blood flow stays intentional to their brain and to the rest of their body. People who see stress as negative or have a negative response have blood vessels restrict. Their body responds by restricting blood flow, almost as if they were having a heart attack. So making stress your friend, reframing stress to be a positive, helpful, engaging thing has long-term health effects beyond just helping you navigate the uncertainties of today. Another thing is responding honestly to emotion. We all have emotions. We all have good days. We all have bad days. Transition can bring up all kinds of emotions if you're like me. And again, it's not about pushing it away. Emotion isn't bad. It's all about our response. And the amazing thing is that simply acknowledging emotion and naming it actually calms down our limbic system. So if I said, I'm just feeling really anxious today, all of a sudden my limbic system calms down by naming it, and I suddenly have more mental energy. So name the emotion, be honest about it. And we'll talk about a spiritual practice that can help with that later on as well. But being honest with emotion. There are people who actually, in my brain-based coaching class, it was advocated that even before a meeting, as people are coming to a meeting from busy other places in life and work, it can just be a helpful thing to check in with everyone, saying, sharing the emotion that they're coming with, because it kind of helps people clear their mental palate and calm down whatever's been happening and enter in to the task at hand in a more engaged way. Gratitude. So gratitude has been shown to be the antidote to negativity bias. Being very intentional to find things to be grateful for actually helps our brain be more positive, and helps combat that negativity bias. It helps improve our emotional resilience. So a simple practice of just even every day being intentional to say something or recognize something we are most grateful for, maybe journaling about the things we're most grateful for, will actually build the muscle in our brain that helps us be more grateful and less negative. I was just reading this week that many of you I'm sure have heard of Sheryl Sandberg, who's one of the executives at Facebook, and she some years ago lost her husband very unexpectedly to a heart attack or some heart issue. And it was a devastating loss to her and their children. And she was working through with a grief counselor. Afterwards, she was deep in grief, of course. And he asked her if she had any awareness of anything positive, and she just couldn't even fathom. She's like, I can't even go there. I can't think of anything positive. I'm just so devastated. And he happened to mention, he said, well, one thing would be that, what if your husband had had the heart attack while he was driving your 2 kids? Thankfully he didn't. And she just was like, oh my word, it could be so much worse than it is. She realized something to be grateful for in that terrible situation. And those are the kinds of things we're looking for, is to find those small things that we can feel grateful for, and it will stretch that muscle. Some families do this as an evening dinner practice, to say, what are you most grateful for today? And it can be a great way to build that kind of emotional resiliency into our children. Another thing is to choose your focus. The brain stays more mentally engaged at a level of thinking about vision and planning, and starts to lose engagement at detail and problems and venting and drama. So if a good venting session with a friend about whatever's going on or whatever you're frustrated by, have at it. I think those can be helpful and awesome and can kind of clear the way to get to a more positive attitude. But longer term, especially in ambiguous places, if we can stay focused on what's my vision for my next chapter, what are some strategies for helping me get there, versus getting into the place of details. Like I worked with a woman who was in an executive position in transition, and she was just kind of stymied, thinking that if she took another position, what if it was out of town, her husband's job, caretaking for her mother who lived nearby, their children. it was just kind of stymieing to think how that could work out. And that's just way too much detail to deal with in ambiguity. To stay at a higher level and trust that those details will all work out in their own good time can help us stay more positive. And then growth mindset. This has been a buzzword and a buzz term in recent years, but a growth mindset looks at challenges and sees opportunities and can quickly reframe them to be opportunities, versus a fixed mindset, which tends to see limitations. Failure or job loss is the limit of my abilities. I'll probably never be able to find another job like I had before. Those are fixed mindset, versus growth mindset is challenges help me learn and grow. I can navigate this, and I expect to find something new. So staying open, staying dialed into opportunities and possibilities. This too is an area where it's easy to think, oh, I know somebody who's just a fixed mindset person. And certainly by personality type, some of us are glass half full or glass half empty. That can be very true. But we all, regardless of that, we all have fixed mindset pockets and places in our life where we just naturally, based on life experience, kind of go to the place of negativity. And so again, to just recognize that, listen to it, give it attention, and say, what are the chances that could happen? And kind of question it and try to reframe it. And what would a growth mindset instead look like? And kind of working through that mentally. Okay, so that was negativity bias and some strategies. I would love to know if, I'm going to see the chat function, hold on here. If anything there most resonated for you as you hear about that, whether something you've experienced, or if you put it in the chat function, something you experienced or something you found insightful, this is a chance to participate a little bit and wake up our brains. Someone said our brains are Velcro. We need to tally up the positives so it sticks. Yes. Very good reminder. Yep, resiliency. This is a way, yes, Nicholas, this is a way to make ourselves, help ourselves become more resilient. Actually, we can become more resilient by emotionally resilient by doing these things. So it's a way to build those muscles. Anybody else? Oh, here we go. Mexico City, oh my word. Welcome from Mexico City. Gratitude. Gratitude resonates, yes. Gratitude, the antidote to negativity, yes, awesome. And these are things that we can practice now. Maybe we have a little more time in our life without the demands of a job, or so to have space in our life to kind of build in some of these practices can actually be its own gift sometimes. Well, great, thank you for those. We'll jump now into the next part, which is, ta-da, threat state. So this is the other kind of downer part of what our brain, how our brain responds. Like I said earlier, the limbic system, the brain organizes everything that we experience as a threat or a reward. Threat state heightens our fight, flight, or freeze response. And reward, if we interpret something as a reward, it enlivens us, engages us, and empowers us. And it's important to know that this determination of threat versus reward happens so automatically, so reflexive, so instantaneous. In fact, it's been found that it happens in a fifth of a second. So it's very unconscious. And our brain, our limbic system, is actually on hyper alert to determine threat or reward. So again, it happens very unconsciously based on what we stored away in the back of our mind. So whether it's true or not that it's a threat, that's how our brain might interpret it. Threat state, if we interpret something as threat state, it literally decreases our mental capacities. It decreases our field of view. We're less able to see a broader view. We kind of hone in. It decreases our capacity for working memory, so to connect to things we know, our capacity for creativity and insights, and our ability to collaborate with others. We literally kind of mentally shut down and shrink in when we're experiencing something where we perceive as threats. Whereas if we interpret it as reward state, it enhances all of those things. And this may seem, and it is, very primitive, but it was actually very helpful in when you think about being chased by a dinosaur. What happens is, can be very helpful in that the glucose and that would typically be in our brain, that energy gets channeled, taken from our brain and channeled into our body so that we're better able to respond physically. So running from the dinosaur, or you may have heard of, episodes where someone in a crisis situation scaled a fence to help someone or lifted a car off of someone with superhuman strength. That literally is the brain channeling energy to the body to equip the body to respond well. And the amount of threat that we perceive is actually correlates with the amount of mental decrease that we experience. Because again, if we perceive a big threat, our brain channels more energy into the body. So this can be very helpful for us. It's just not always helpful if we're interpreting things as a threat that aren't necessarily, or it doesn't serve us well. But here's, to me, the kicker. This was a huge aha for me, that in the brain, physical threats and social threats are the same. So if I touch a flame and experience physical pain, that kind of a response in my body, in my brain, is the same as feeling excluded in a group, social group. The brain does not distinguish between the two, but has a very similar response to social threats or to physical threats. So both release cortisol, which is a stress hormone with the same intensity, whether I'm feeling excluded by a group or my hand in a flame. So I think this was really an aha and helpful for me. And I think it's especially helpful in career transition, because a lot of the threats we feel can feel so squishy. It's like, maybe you've experienced, like I have, leaving a meeting and going, why do I feel bad about that? I'm not even sure what happened there, but I have just a funny feeling. And a lot of times we're feeling a social threat that we can't quite put our finger on. So physical threats can feel so tangible, but social threats can feel so intangible and squishy. And the Neuro Leadership Institute, who I studied with, put some additional definition to this that I'm going to take you through. But before I do that, the dynamic here is that if you've ever worked with someone who is intimidating to you, or been in a relationship with someone who is intimidating with you, that kind of a social threat feeling can literally decrease your ability to, a lot of people make more mistakes around that person, are less able to think and speak intelligently because we're feeling a social threat, and our mental capacity is decreasing in response to that threat. So here is what the Neuro Leadership Institute, their research has defined as 5 social threat domains. And I want to walk you through these because I think it becomes helpful. We all have a social threat profile. There are some of these that I am more sensitive to. For me, it's actually status and relatedness. I've taken a test, and I'll tell you how you can do that online to kind of find out what your triggers are for social threats. But all of these are relevant, especially in transition. So I'm going to describe each one to you, and I want you to listen carefully and see if you can identify which one of these feels the most potent for you in job transition, career transition. And then we'll take a little poll. So I want you to listen up and listen for what is most relevant to you. They call this the SCARF threats. Threats of status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. So the acronym SCARF. And status threats are around our desire to feel esteemed, valued, and important. And, certainly in career transition, I think we all realize how much of our identity comes from our work. It's always it's been surprising to me. I'd like to think that I'm a very well-rounded person, and I've got a very, engaged, holistic view of my life, but status in work is a real thing, and it's a big thing. So if you're feeling like being in conversations where you're not able to say I'm the so-and-so at this company, that could be a status threat. Maybe you not having a secure role, and maybe your transition is stretching out longer than you anticipated, and maybe you've had some lost opportunity or been overlooked for positions. That can be a status threat. It starts to question our feeling of feeling esteemed and valued and important and like a contributor in the world of work. So that's status. Threats of certainty are about ambiguity, and oh my word, ambiguity reigns supreme in career transition. So that can threaten our desire for context and clarity and a sense that our expectations are met or are going to be met. I often in transition found myself saying, if I just knew that in 6 months I was going to have a job, I would enjoy this so much more. But the lack of that, the ambiguity, can be so unsettling. So our desire for certainty can certainly be triggered. Third, autonomy. That's the desire for some measure of control and self-directed choices, which again can feel kind of out the window as we're looking for opportunities, applying for opportunities, and feeling like others kind of hold the cards about whether we're offered a position. Or so our sense of autonomy and wanting to have some decision-making power can be triggered in all of this. By the way, I'll come back and give you some antidotes and some strategies for each of these, but I want you to just listen in on which seems most relevant to you. Relatedness. Relatedness is about our desire for connection. You know, we want to feel like the in group versus the outer group. We want to feel like friends versus foes. So again, if we have a lot of relatedness in our work, our desire for connection and meaningful connection, and having that not be present in a work way can be very unsettling. I was coaching with a woman today who said she's actually just finished a career transition, and she said, actually, in pandemic COVID times with working from home, she said all the fun stuff was stripped away. And I realized the work itself was not even meaningful to me. It was about the relationships and the environment and the culture. And I thought this was a great example of relatedness kind of carrying us through, even when maybe we don't even like our job. So relatedness, a desire for connection and feeling like the in-group. And then finally, fairness. And this is just what it is, a desire for fair exchange and impartiality and, fair compensation. Or maybe some of us, like me, I'm 60 now, and I've been through career transition in the last few years and just wondered, gosh, ageism, am I being given a fair shake despite my age and gender, ethnicity, race, salary? There are lots of things that can trigger our concern for fairness. So SCARF, those social threats: status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. And I would love now, if you guys we're going to put up a poll, and I would love to have you guys vote what you think is your most potent social threat in career transition. And we'll see kind of who we have in the audience and what kind of reigns supreme in terms of SCARF threats. So go ahead and you can click one of the buttons there for status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. And as we do that, Harry's tabulating in the back. He's got his calculator out, right, Harry? And he'll post the results, the percentages here in a second, before I then share some antidotes for each of those things. Get your votes in quickly, and then we'll. Okay, yeah. Yep, a lot of you are like me, status. It's a big hit to the status. Our need and desire, not just desire, but our need for status. 38% certainty, autonomy and fairness are tied. And then the relatedness. Well, I'm glad you're finding other places to relate to people, it sounds like, for many of you. So thank you. Yes, status. Yeah, thanks for doing that. Very informative. And a lot of you, like I said, are a lot like me. So I'm going to go back to this, and you can go take your profile, because again, all of us are prone to one, or more scarf threats, and it's really helpful to kind of know what those are, even in our back when we're in the work world or in our family. You might find this fun to do as a family, because you'll find that a lot of arguments or issues in your family or in your relationships kind of can be sent back, tagged back to what your scarf threats were. So whether you have a spouse or a friend or family that you'd want to do this with, you can check out this link at the Neuro Leadership Institute, and they have some interesting, it's kind of a fun little exercise, and they have some interesting information on that as well. So that was all about the brain, the negativity bias and the threat state. Hold on, I said I would go back and do this, didn't I? So for those of you who status, here are some things you can do. It's been shown that finding places to learn and grow our knowledge actually help a lot with status. And there are a lot of places, there are a lot of classes online through universities and free classes that you can take, maybe even related to your work, or to expand your knowledge within your work. So that can be a really great offset to status. It really increases our sense of knowledge. Volunteering, feeling like we can contribute in that way. And also just the wrestling with identity. There's something really good sometimes about going, you know what, my whole life is not my work, or my X% of my identity is not my work. So kind of wrestling through that are some strategies for status threat. Certainty, one of the main things is, like all of you are doing, dialing into resources, places like Crossroads Career Network that can help break down the search process into tangible, actionable steps, and making those steps for yourself and walking through, versus having this long, ambiguous process, having steps you can walk through, and noticing those. And intentional explorations, being strategic and kind of setting some goals for yourself, and then having kind of the camaraderie of someone like Career Crossroads, who have navigated and help people navigate this through, finding a resource that can help you with the process. Autonomy, it's really important to find internal intrinsic goals and rewards. So the temptation in transition is to say, what job and what's next and where will I, and to look outside of ourselves very instinctively. And the intentionality to say, wait, what are my goals for this next chapter? What would be my vision for what I want to accomplish? And what are the types of companies and cultures that are important to me and that are not important to me? So having that sense of choice and priorities for ourselves. Relatedness, again, camaraderie is big. So a class at Crossroads Career or someplace else that can help you find some camaraderie and not feel so isolated, very helpful and important. And then fairness, some of that is just out of our control, but I'm just a believer that helping others and maybe being a resource to others as you're in a time of transition and networking with others and helping others out, that the circle of goodwill will just come back to us. So being able to trust that, and trust, for me, for a lot of us as spiritual people, to trust God's good intentions and goodwill for us in that. So those are the brains, negativity bias and threat state. And now we'll kind of shift into the spiritual practices part. And this was the other piece that, honestly, for me, you guys just saved my life and opened me up to possibilities that I would not have thought of otherwise. Everything I just shared really reinforces Romans 12:2. The verse says, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then, once we renew our mind, we'll be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, perfect will. This was like such a big aha for me when I was studying brain science. It's like, oh my word, it's a real thing. That if we renew our mind and are intentional about how we think, that we will be more discerning people and more open to God's good possibilities in our life. And here's where the cool neuroscience comes in. Neuroscience is showing that connection and community with God, or for any of you, higher power, or however, what kind of spiritual orientation you bring to this, I'm very respectful of that. but communion and connection with a higher power or God literally rewires our brain. These are some books that I've read and studied, and I would recommend The God-Shaped Brain, a counselor, psychologist who studied and connected the dots for that. What the Body Knows About God is a good book. How God Changes Your Brain. Andrew Newberg is what he is called a neurotheologist, which I think is an interesting thing to be in the world. And then finally, Holy Noticing. Charles Stone is a pastor and struggled with anxiety and depression throughout his life, and finally came to a point where he just realizes he needed more something to help him overcome his anxiety. He was in a family health crisis that really brought this to a fore. And he developed, this is a really practical book, he lays out a process for becoming more mindful, and he uses Christ-centered mindfulness and calls it Holy Noticing. So it's a really practical how-to book that you could easily pick up and use to kind of practice through your career transition. But these books literally they're showing that there are certain types of spiritual practices, not all spiritual practices that we're familiar with, but certain types that I'll describe that rewire our brain, strengthen our soul, cultivate character, and deepen our discernment. So for now, through transition and just for leadership and life in general, these are really important and helpful things. The types of spiritual experiences that do this, they actually stimulate the brain in a very unique way that few other things do. They both arouse the brain and they both soothe the brain at the same time. So they're kind of activating that parasympathetic system, that fight or flight. They're making us kind of energized to respond. And they're also soothing us with the sympathetic system. So, and very few things in life do that in the same way. So these can be super helpful. And I'll talk a little bit more about this. And I will say, when I was going through my first big transition, I happened to be in a prayer group in my church. And mind you, the last thing I wanted to do, to be quite honest, was be in a prayer group. But I ended up going to this event and finding out it was a prayer group. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me. But I was not a big fan of prayer because I thought of prayer as boring and as a responsibility. And I didn't have time for it. I was a busy woman, running around. So I kind of had an aversion to prayer, but I found myself in a spiritual community in my church, and we were learning fresh ways of praying. And there are the ways that we'll talk about here that were not just my going through my big long list of all the things I want and making sure I cover them all so that I make sure God hears. And it actually opened up my ability to, in a very wilderness time, connect with God in a new way and learn to hear God's voice in a new way. So I'm a big believer in these things. The way that changes our brain is, the kind of prayer is not the conversational prayer we're used to necessarily, but more communion with God. It's about just experiencing God, being with God, not doing a lot of talking, but more presence, more listening, more meditating on God's presence, having encounters with God, and bringing our full attention and our focus to just being in God's presence. That alone rewires our brain. Some have called it Christ-centered meditation, holy noticing, like the book I just mentioned, contemplative prayer, practicing the presence, but it's literally about being in God's presence and not necessarily filling it with a lot of words. And this speaks to the fact that prayer is, most people, a majority of Americans say they pray, but very few have report experiencing God's presence or having a sense of peace as a result. So it's not about whether or not we pray, it's more about the vitality that we have in our prayer life. And this is where experiencing and bringing a greater variety and vitality to our prayer life can literally be what makes a difference in how we think. John Eldredge, many of you might be familiar with. He's a pastor who's written a lot of books, great books. And his latest one is Get Your Life Back on Track, Everyday Practices for a World Gone Mad. He's actually got the 1 Minute Pause app. It's about pausing in your day to just center and be in God's presence. He talks about the kind of the movement or deepening of relationship from a faith orientation and a belief in a higher power than God towards this deeper intimacy and union and experience and presence with God as being the thing that is our goal and is our outcome. As Jesus said, that they may be one, Father, even as you are one, that there be this union, this time of being centered in God's presence. And here's the awesome news. It literally changes our brain and renews our mind. And just 12 minutes a day of practicing this kind of presence with God for 8 weeks, 12 minutes a day for 8 weeks, literally changes our brain enough to be detected on brain scans. The regions of our brain that govern fear and anxiety and stress shrink in that time. And the regions that are about emotional regulation, empathy, and compassion are enlivened and grow. So this is where the character piece comes out, that we become less anxious people. We become more, I actually have friends that have said by practicing prayer like this, they were kind of healed from their anxiety. They've overcome anxiety. And it's a real thing. It's being backed up by science. This type of prayer quiets our brain circuitry that's bombarded with these negative thoughts and feelings and amplifies the circuitry that helps us live out for what for many of us is the goal of having a Christ-like life in mind. This just speaks to all the parts of the brain that get enlivened when we connect with God. Again, the frontal lobe, it's connecting, it's the rational mind, it's connecting what we're experiencing to what we know, theology. Other parts are connecting those thoughts to emotions and compassion. Again, we're both aroused and energized. We're also soothed and relaxed. The center of fear and anger is calmed, and it stimulates emotion. So it really, again, just kind of enlivens the whole brain in a unique way. And it has an abundance of benefits, not just to the mind and to the brain. Overriding, it can lower our blood pressure. It can help us feel more curious and kind of not get into that automatic judgment and response. So as we do this and we just kind of stop our mental activity and open ourselves and create space and focus to be with God, it trains our brain to be less reactive and less judgmental and less interpretive so quickly. We're able to keep things open and be more curious and non-judgmental and intentional in what we think and how we respond, which can always be a good thing. And it's not only benefits for our brain, but our whole selves, better sleep. All these things are being shown to be true. Greater sensitivity to sin and injustice, greater appreciation for beauty. All these things are being shown to be byproducts of this way of praying and being with God. And for those of us who are Christian and Christ followers, it's the life that Jesus modeled in Scripture. He was his stillness and dignity, his lack of defensiveness, his attentiveness, his alertness to temptations, his honest awareness of his own fear. Again, he didn't push it away. He was just honest about it and brought it to God. And his experience of abandonment on the cross, kind of giving himself over, all speak to the fact that this kind of mind that was in Christ can be in us if we open ourselves up in this way. And J.I. Packer, who just passed away, a theologian, talks about this just being a lost art. It's not about kind of a new way, or maybe some people would say, it's the Eastern meditation was kind of a bad buzzword in some Christian circles for some time. This is actually the Desert Fathers and Mothers practiced these kinds of meditative practices, and it's a lost art that we can bring. So finally, and then I just want to take us through a quick practice. It's not about kind of throwing out our standard ways for those of us who have a faith that we practice, Bible study, memorization, request-based prayer. All those things can be good. They're just not the things that necessarily rewire our brain. So it's bringing in more things to round that out, more listening, more silence, more contemplation, more presence. And I've just kind of listed a variety of types of prayer that I've just found so refreshing breath prayer, imaginative prayer. Just there are ways of experiencing scripture and experiencing prayer that can be actually less, more of a vacation and require less of me in some ways. So lest they sound complicated and austere, which, sometimes these things can, again, I just have found them so enlivening, and I find I can come to my prayer chair in the morning. Now that I've turn around on the whole prayer concept, I can come to my prayer chair in the morning and say, gosh, what does my soul most need today? And having developed a variety of ways of praying and experiencing God's presence, I can just enter into that in a way that honestly feels like a daily vacation. So I want to just give us a few minutes. I'm just less than 5 minutes. I want to just walk us through a little practice so that you can taste some of these. The first is breath prayer, and that's just literally about centering breaths. The breath is what God gave us for life and will take from us when our life is over. It is very, very holy to be centered in our breath in God's presence. And then with breathing, pair that with a meaningful phrase or a meaningful verse. In career transition, I often would breathe into, "It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul." So when I'm not feeling like it's well with my soul, something about breath prayer and praying that phrase or a phrase like that in God's presence can be very reassuring and soothing. And our breath prayer can change. We can have a different phrase depending on where we find ourselves or what maybe concern or what joy we're experiencing. We can pair that phrase with our breath. I'll walk us through that in a minute. And then prayer postures. So imagining ourselves in a place, maybe a favorite place, and inviting God to be there with us. Might be around a campfire. I like to sit in Adirondack chairs, and I imagine myself in one and God in another, and we're around a campfire. Or maybe it's a beautiful place you've been that you love to mentally return to, or the ocean or a mountain. I often found myself sitting on the top of a mountain like Moses did with God. God gave Moses a vision of the sacred future, but God knew that Moses didn't. And something about sitting on the top of a mountain, looking out into the unknown and knowing that God knows what will happen, even though I don't, was again, just very centering and soothing for me. And then welcoming prayer. And this gets back to the idea that it's not about pushing our emotions away. It's literally about being honest about them and inviting them into God's presence. So wherever maybe you're sitting with God around a campfire or by the ocean, just literally inviting my anxiety, my fear to just sit with God and me. And it can be surprising how my fear shrinks and my sense of God's presence and trustworthiness increases. So I just want to give us a chance, having explained that, to just practice that for a few minutes. So I would love it if you would just kind of settle in and get centered and get comfortable, if you're not already, and close your eyes and just kind of notice your breath, breathing in and then breathing out. Noticing your mental activity, just focusing, coming to attention on your breath. Maybe then stretching out the length of your breaths. And then just imagining a meaningful verse. Or the phrase of a song or a hymn, or something that you would like to say to the Lord in a time like this. And start pairing that with your breath, breathing in, breathing out. And then once you feel hopefully more centered and connected with yourself and with God, maybe just imagine yourself in a favorite place, whether in nature, or some people have mentioned crawling up into God's lap and feeling curled up there. But imagine yourself in a favorite place, and then inviting God to join you there. And just be in the experience of breathing in the breath of life that God gave you, and being in the Lord's presence. And then imagine an emotion that maybe isn't one of your favorites, or that kind of nags at you in this season of transition and of life. And I just invite you to invite it to join you and God. If it's anxiety, if it's fear, if it's anger, whatever it is, to just be with you and God. And notice how your body responds, and your mind responds. And then slowly bring yourself back to the present, and as we wrap up, I hope you find in that some tools and resources that are helpful to you. If you are interested in others, I have other practices. I offer spiritual direction and discernment groups for women in transition and in life, and would love to give you any other ideas if you find me on LinkedIn. But the goal, again, is to, especially with breath prayer, waking up in the middle of the night anxious, it's great to practice breath prayer then. In the middle of stressful meetings or conversations, you can kind of do it subconsciously to kind of recenter and settle yourself. And I hope you find that it can be a great gateway into other types of prayer and experiences with God, as just a way to center and be more present with God. So thank you. That is the end of my sharing. I know, gosh, I've taken us right up to almost the end, Tom. I'm sorry about that. I don't know if we have time for any questions, or if anyone had questions.
Well, I didn't see any questions. Harry, did you see any questions?
I have not seen anything pop up. Nope.
Okay. So, well, that the practice time was very helpful, Kristin. I enjoyed that, and a lot of what you spoke of, some of the new things that I learned tonight, something I really will want to take over and into tomorrow and try to figure out. And just taking that 1 minute breath and just cleansing, I think too, is just so many things that you just talked about. So thank you very much for your talk tonight. Thank you to all the contributors, Charlie. Thank you, Harry, for running the board. Thank you all for being here tonight. Tomorrow you'll receive an email with links to many of the things we might have talked about tonight. A recording of the webinar will be posted at the bottom of the seminars page on our website, so you can look for that. Also, be sure to check out our website for more information about signing up for the 8-week Zoom class. We have one starting again Tuesday the 17th from 3:30 to 5:30, and then one on in December and a couple in January. So looked into that, very helpful. Again, meat and potatoes, think meat and potatoes. networking with Grace every Thursday morning. Sign up for that. That'll be a help catalyst to helping your job search launch and catapult it into the next realm. One-on-one help. If you need help, resume, interviewing, any number of things, check out our website and check into the one-on-one help. Prayer support. We talked about prayer as we're closing out. If you want someone else praying for you, we have that available through our website. So check that out. Now we have our next webinar will feature Ann Pryor. So next Thursday morning, November the 19th from 7:30 to 9, and will join us, and she will help us through dealing with and how to use LinkedIn, titled How to Look Great and Be Found on LinkedIn for Job Search Success. So you won't want to miss that. That'll be next Thursday morning, the 19th. You can find the details and pre-register on our website. I hope this was worthwhile for you today. I certainly enjoyed it. Best wishes to you and your job search and your transition. Have a happy Thanksgiving, and hopefully we'll see you back here in December or at the next seminar on Thursday morning, the 19th. Thank you, and have a blessed day.